Welcome into the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer, happy to be joined for the second time this week by good friend Mark Potash of the arch rival Chicago Sun-Times for a special mailbag edition of the Take the North podcast. Mark, you did such a good job on the first time we had you. We brought you right back to answer some more questions from our loyal and astute audience. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I even wore the same shirt.
Yeah, me too. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy the way that worked out here on this holiday weekend to be able to do that. So we've got a handful of questions from our, as I said, our astute and loyal Take the North audience. I know you are typically a member of that audience, and so you know how astute and loyal the Take the North audience can be. And we appreciate your loyalty. But we're going to start with a question from Nick Ritchie 11. Who wants to know a little bit about Caleb Williams. We've obviously talked a lot about Caleb Williams all offseason. And he asks this. He says, I think a lot of Caleb's quote-unquote down year last season at USC was that he had to be the best player on the field every game, making it too much to overcome. How important is it that now he has so many playmakers around him and he doesn't have to be the best player on the field game in and game out for Chicago? Your thoughts on that?
It's absolutely important. I mean, look at what happened with, like I said, with Trubisky and Fields, and it's a matter of support. Any quarterback needs support. What the quarterback does is kind of the it factor of a quarterback is the guy who makes you play better, but you still have to be good in the first place. He doesn't make a bad player good. He makes a good player great. That's what the Joe Burrows and the Tom Brady's do, and Patrick Mahomes, and so that's really. But you still need that. Oh, you absolutely. I think the supporting cast. I think the offense. I'm more of a Shane Waldron. I'm putting this more on Shane Waldron because you can have DJ Moore, but he's got to get open. He's got to get open. Yeah. Frankly, he's got to be open more than he was even last year. And you got to have a design that allows everyone to support the quarterback. So he's not going to be a game manager by any stretch, but he definitely needs the supporting cast is huge. I mean, Caleb Williams has the wind at his back in more ways than one. He's got a better supporting cast, better weapons than any Bears quarterback has had since Cutler in 2013. And unlike Cutler in 2013, he's got a defense that's going to keep him in games and not put pressure on him to always be, every time he steps on the field, he's not going to be another touchdown behind. He might even be ahead. And that's an even bigger factor is that this defense is going to give him a chance. I always go back to this one stat, even under Fields, it improved in the first 14 games first 21 games of the Eberflus regime. The Bears were like 2-8 when they scored 20 or more points. In the last 6, they were 5-1, and then continued a game with Tyson Bagent. So their defense even gave Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent a better chance to win. Think what it's going to do, and it should be better, right? It should be. That was a 20th ranked defense. This should be a top 10 defense.
No question.
Think how much miss room that's going to give a guy like Caleb Williams to not feel that pressure. So I think those two things together, more weapons and three things, more weapons, theoretically a better offensive scheme and a better defense is going to give him a better chance to succeed, which is going to be kind of the theme. Because what the Justin Fields people are going to be saying, oh man, if only Justin Fields had this defense, and had these weapons, so.
But you make a great point about the defense, because I do think at USC last year, they were playing so many chase games and so many keep up games. And it does put a strain on a quarterback that then creates bad habits, both mentally and physically, where you're swinging for the fences all the time because you need to keep up, and you can't play the brand of quarterbacking that is successful in the NFL, which is just be efficient all game long and do surgery, and you don't have to put on a fireworks show every week.
I always go back to Brett Favre, who played with great confidence, not afraid to make mistakes against the Bears, but his worst game ever was against the greatest show on turf against the Rams, when every time when he felt pressure, every time he failed, he was going to be another touchdown behind. And sure enough, he threw like 5 or 6 interceptions that game in a playoff game and got crushed. To me, it's an example of the difference. You always the Brett Favre we saw, who was so confident against the Bears because he knew that he was always going to, until the end, he knew that he was always going to have another shot against when he had that fear of falling behind. All of a sudden, that put a pressure on him that made a difference. I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
So yeah, I mean, not only is it important that he has a supporting cast, but it's calculated, it's strategic. Ryan Poles went out and tried to create that infrastructure for his rookie quarterback to do it. I reflect back on a question I asked Kerry Joseph in the spring about how, one of the big questions league wide is, can Caleb tap into that superpower he has of making extended plays without becoming over reliant on it, where it's like, okay, now I'm going to just extend a play because I know I can make a big play, and now I become over reliant on it. And Kerry Joseph just laughed and said the only way that he kind of finds a sweet spot of that is by looking around and realizing he's got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roman Dunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, and just understanding that those guys are high level professionals that can make plays also. And the mental security, I think that gives a quarterback is going to be huge for Caleb Williams.
And Dan, one thing, if I could say, just to, because I think it's important to point, it's not really to that point, but one thing I think that will be the key difference in that is when he's running around, as opposed to Fields, is how quickly can he make that decision?
Yeah.
I think that was the problem with Fields. Is he would, there would be guys open, but for an instant he'd miss that instant and it was gone.
And then he would activate his legs instead of trying to figure out a way to activate his arm.
That's why you're running more than you're passing. The difference, and I bring this up because I think that's one difference. You talk about off season, and you can't make any judgments about it. It's hard to make any judgment. If there's one thing we've seen a difference, is that Caleb Williams just gets rid of the ball quicker. He's just got he's so if he can make that decision, the ball's going to come out and he's going to make the play. So that to me, that, and again, sorry to drag you off your topic, but I think that will be the key to making those types of plays work, is how well he processes that, because we know that once he makes that decision, the ball's going to get out.
That's quarterback savvy, right? I mean, that's 100% quarterback savvy and understanding how to do those things. And from the early returns, it seems like he's going to be there. Scott H has a question. He says, this seems like a nice house built on sand. Why are we relying on the hope that somebody will fill the obvious major holes in the trenches by being better than they have ever been? So this is an obvious worry about the offensive and defensive lines. I think there is a legitimate point folded within this question. Obviously, you're at the 3-tech position. You're rolling the dice and betting big on Gervon Dexter. At the offensive line position, you've got some guys on the interior. You're banking on Tevin Jenkins to stay healthy. You're banking on Ryan Bates or Coleman Shelton to be your center. You're trying to figure out that interior offensive line. You're hoping Braxton Jones goes up a level. What are your thoughts on whether those trenches are sturdy enough to hold up what seems like a nice house in Scott H's mind that he thinks is maybe built on sand?
Well, I don't know if they're sturdy enough to begin with. I think they have the potential to be sturdy enough. Hey, look, you're looking at a team that led the league in rushing defense and was second in rushing offense. That's a pretty good base. I mean, you can't be bad at both on both sides of the line and have. That's a great starting point. That means, regardless of what Pro Football Focus says, you've got something there, right? You've got something to build on. And I think that's the key, is on both sides of the line, especially with Sweat in there, they have something to build on. Because Sweat, as I was skeptical about the whole multiplier thing, and that proved, and polls proved right about that. So I think offensively and on the offensive line and the defensive line, those are obviously two big X factors. But I guess my point would be, I think they've got, I think they've got foundations there that that both lines can be good. And again, goes back to what I've said before about Gervon Dexter. You're not hoping for like Bilal Nichols to turn into a great player. You're hoping for a second-round pick who's actually done pretty well. Nothing against Bilal, but he was like a 5th-round draft pick. And the Bears are constantly trying to get hope for guys to overachieve. Gervon Dexter just has to achieve. So
can't be Ego Ferguson, is what you're telling me.
Right, there you go. That goes back even further. But anyway, Darnell Wright, it just has to achieve. So I think offensive line is kind of, I think I call it, look for it in Sunday Sun Times, the biggest X factor on the team after Caleb Williams. I think it's an offensive line that was part of the second best rushing attack in the league last year. And even if you extract all quarterbacks, they were 12th in just running back yardage. And so they were, so pretty good, but a lot of sacks allowed. Now, how much was Fields a factor in that on both the running, the good and the bad?
No doubt.
We'll find out. But my point is, you have you have the foundation, certainly at right tackle, certainly at left guard, but you got to stay healthy. That's the biggest factor.
You
You know,
can't be
I always go. It's my pet.
reshuffling every week, right? Like,
It's my. I'm sure Chris Morgan is tired of me asking about continuity, but I'm huge on it. I think continuity makes a mediocre line really, really good. You know, the last time the Bears had all five starters start all 16 games, they were second in the league in
2013, right?
offense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
It
you
might
know,
be their only top 10 offense in like 30 years, I think.
right, exactly, exactly. Exactly. If you consider in 2018 they were ninth, but really in points scored they were 12th because of all the defensive scores. You know, Chris Morgan, the only time he's had an offensive line where all five starters started all 16 games, Matt Ryan was an MVP and he went to the Super Bowl. And
Yeah,
if not for breakdowns in the offensive line at center and like right tackle, he would have won the Super Bowl. You can argue that. So continuity is a huge thing. I think I am not as concerned about even with kind of the uncertainty uh, 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 with Nate Davis and um, Braxton Jones, can he take the next? Even with some uncertainty there, and at center, I'm still not as worried about the personnel they have as just keeping everybody healthy,
yep,
especially a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who's
yep.
he's a Pro Bowl level player when he plays. I think
Contract
more
year.
often than not.
Contract year too, and to your
Yeah,
point on continuity, we're just about 2 weeks away from playing everyone's favorite training camp game. Is Nate Davis practicing today? Which is a game that will be daily until it's no longer daily. All right, so we have a question here from JB, and his question is actually directed toward Matt Eberflus, but we're going to twist it so that we can answer it. And he wants to know, with a new QB and so many new pieces coupled, with a new QB and so many new pieces, coupled with last year's disappointing start to the season, has this informed or changed the Bears' ideas on how much starters should play in the preseason? Are there any team goals other than injury prevention? Now, as you know, this is a different preseason because they get an extra week of camp because of the Hall of Fame game. They get an extra preseason game because of the Hall of Fame game. And now you have the old traditional 4 games to play around with reps. But what should they be looking to do? And I think there's a very valid point there in saying, look, a rookie starting quarterback and a lot of new pieces probably need to get some familiarity with each other, even as you play the cautious game of making sure everyone's ready for the regular season. How do you strike that balance if you're Matt Eberflus and to some extent Ryan Poles?
well, striking the balance is the key. I always think guys should play. I just think it's invaluable when you have a team that's still developing. That's the thing. That now is the time when they really should be, because they actually have I think, some really good players. Those guys got to play, and so there's more to get out of it this year than there has been in the past. Yeah, this is not just for experience; it's for experience playing together, and I think that's important. But again, you got to worry, but you also have to look at what the other teams are doing,
Yeah,
because if you're playing it against a bunch of scrubs or backups or whatever, I mean, how productive is that? I mean, I'll be honest. My answer is it's a really difficult question to answer
yeah,
because it's so fluid and there's too many other factors, not just what you do, it's what the other team does. And so I don't worry so much about the injury factor, because I think but not playing put you at risk in the first 2 games of the regular season. I don't know what the
right.
stats say, but I think being ready. I think being here's to the point of the question. I think being ready at the when the bell rings is really, really important, and I think you should do whatever you can to be ready. And so I would be more in favor, and I think they will. I can't remember how much we've asked. I don't think we've really asked Matt
Yeah,
Eberflus about
well,
that.
he said he was still kind of feeling it out the last time we talked about it. You'd think back to 2019, where the Bears took the ultra cautious approach during the preseason, and then came out in the curtain lifter for the NFL's 100th season, and absolutely laid a turd on Soldier Field and lost 10-3 to the Packers. And it was, even though they won their next 3 games, that felt like a tone setting game to start the
Yeah.
season, where they weren't ready. They weren't ready for the bell, as you say, and so it wasn't there. The Bears are obviously going to invite the Bengals into town for one day of crossover practices in August. It'll be really fascinating to see how much work they can squeeze out of that. I know they were thrilled a year ago to have the 2
Yeah.
with the Colts and felt like they got a lot of scripted, controlled work in that up the intensity. So they'll have to use that. Look, like we're on the road 3 times in the preseason. I think we got Canton, Buffalo, and Kansas City. I certainly wouldn't mind skipping one of those. I'm sure some of the players have their hands up to sit out one of those as well. So it'll be a nice challenge for Matt. And again, I think Ryan to kind of to come to an agreement on what makes the most sense for this team, particularly given the new pieces.
The Indy situation to me kind of even complicates it because I kind of felt like Eberflus was more likely to play guys than not. But they felt like their work was done in those practices. They get more out of the practices. So I think that week, I don't think players are going to play. So
they'll
be
play on Thursday. They'll do the Thursday practice at House, and then the big names will sit out on that Saturday.
So I think that's actually it will be an interesting thing to watch. Is not only how they do it, but what the effect is, and a lot of it has to do with where you are as a team. And I think that's my point. Is that I think the Bears are in one of those in between arrow pointing up type of thing where the league really doesn't respect them. They haven't really done and it shouldn't. The Bears haven't really done anything, but yet they're at this point where they have potential for huge growth. I think that's an opportunity to play guys. I think that's my point. Is I think you want to, but I'll be honest, I have no idea how they're going to handle it because coaches are so skittish. Even you refer to 2019, Matt Nagy, he kind of that was one of the few times he admitted an error and said, I'm going to do it differently. But then
COVID jumped in and they didn't have any preseason.
There was no, I don't think he ever really had a chance. And by then he was sinking in the quicksand the next year. So he never really had a chance to make up for the mistake. So that was kind of his bad luck, but timing is everything. And not to get off topic, but from Caleb Williams and Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles, they all seem to be more relative to the previous regime, more in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. All right. Very last question here. This one comes from our email. It's from Mike Flynn, and he wants to know what win-loss record would be acceptable to keep Matt Eberflus at the helm beyond 2024. I know I have my bar set at 9-8 for this team. That's my prediction. I certainly wouldn't be banging down the door to fire him if they were like 8-9 or even 7-10 if it looked like the right kind of 7-10. For me on this topic, Mark, I think you want to see tangible signs of progress. You want to see tangible signs, as we talked about in our last episode, that the quarterback is who you think he is and that the coaching staff is having the impact on the quarterback that you think that he needs to have. But ultimately, I think 7 is probably – I think if you're sitting in 6-11 territory, then this conversation is going to get a lot hotter. But 7 would be the minimum, and then it's kind of what we always say: what does the 7 to 8 to 9 look like? Do they look like a team that is on the verge of being what they have promised that they're going to be now, which is a team that's going to compete every single year and be in the mix for 8 of the next 10 years if all goes well with the quarterback?
Yeah, Dan, I've got them at 10-7, and I think it's in that 9-10. I think 9-10 range. I think anything under 500 would not bode well for Matt Eberflus. But like you said, it's how they look. This is such it's such a strange year because there's so much expectations, but yet if the arrow is pointing up at the end of the season, I mean, relative to where they are, that's important. So it's hard to say. I mean, I always say, to me, if the defense is the culprit, that changes things. If their offense is good and their defense is the culprit, that's a different 8-9 or 9-8. Than if their defense is top 10 and they have issues on offense. So
we both agree that you can't blow 12-point lead in the final 5 minutes, 21-point lead in the second half, 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. You can't be firing or dismissing 2 of your coaches. Like those things can't happen. And that's independent of win-loss record in 2024. And so Matt is obviously, he's the chief overseer of all this. And so he's got the responsibility of keeping all that on the rails.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. It's so Eberflus it's hard to tell where he is. He's undefined as far as I'm concerned. As far as a head coach, I mean, we don't know much. That's why this will be a defining year. So as far as a barometer or just a level of where, I mean, if he goes 10-7, I'm pretty sure that's likely to be a playoff team, and I think he'll be back. But I think it gets dicey at 9-8 or 8-9 based on where the team is headed. How good is the defense? Just where is this offense under Shane Waldron? So it will be interesting. I will say this: it will be interesting to see, like, how this season ensues. But like I said, Matt Eberflus to me is he's an X factor too. I just think he's undefined at this point.
No question about it. All right. Well, I'm going to let you get back to your summer. For our audience, if you want to keep these questions coming in for our mailbag episodes, these are always good episodes. You can tweet us or X us, I guess, at Dan Wiederer, at David Haugh, or at Take the North Pod, or you can send them to our email account, which is takethenorthpod@gmail.com. Keep them coming. There's been a steady flow here for a while now. It allows us to get to some of the things that you guys want to talk about more often. So we appreciate you. Keep chiming in on that. Like I say, Mark, you get back to your summer. I'll see you in the media room at Halas Hall before too long. I'm always appreciative of your time, your insight, your analysis. It's great stuff. And I can't wait to be back on the sideline with you here in just a matter of weeks.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I appreciate being on the pod, and I too, even in early July, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you at training camp and just being at training camp.
And by the way, when I talk about submitting those questions, I know you are a regular in submitting questions for the Take the North Pod. So you keep them coming too. Yeah. You know how to get to us. You even have our phone numbers to text us if you have questions. So Mark is obviously a good voice in getting topics addressed as well. So always appreciate it. That's Mark Potash. For our producer Adam Stasinski, I'm Dan Wiederer. This is the Take the North podcast. Great talk. See you out there.